I think we can now start. It's 4 p.m. All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening from wherever you're joining us. And for those that will be watching from the YouTube live stream, we're saying good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us. This is our fourth session of the Ocean Leadership series. And today we have an amazing individual and a global expert. And briefly, I'll be introducing our speaker for today to us. Just kindly give me just a minute so I could present my screen. I'm going to be introducing our amazing speaker for today's session. Like we all have been informed, we have global experts taking us on different topics. And today is going to be a very wonderful and amazing session. All right, so
I
I'll be
hope
doing
so.
yeah. So our speaker is Courtney Gehle. Please pardon my pronunciation if I don't get it right. I believe my screen is visible. So Courtney is the co-founder of the Green Line, a youth-led environmental organization, and the Better Tomorrow Movement, an award-winning startup that works to help people create social impact projects. She served as a consultant to UNIDO and as the chairperson of the Brightest Young Minds, an African NPC that connects young leaders and equip them to create sustainable impact across Africa. She recently completed a master's in global affairs as a Schwarzman scholar. For those that know about the Schwarzman scholarship, so having a scholar here, you should understand how important she is, and also to get through to that scholarship, it's not an easy feat at all. And she's a graduate diploma in international development as a Government of Ireland International Education Scholar. Now, talking about impact marketing, what better person do we need to tell us about impact than Courtney? She currently serves as a consultant at Global Changemakers. So I met Courtney in October in South Africa at the Global Changemakers Summit by the Global Changemakers. So she's one of the consultants for the organization. And the Global Changemakers is an international youth organization that has trained young people in over 180 countries, where she had held various leadership roles for over 6 years. And I'm happy to share to those that are here that the Global Changemakers was the sponsor of our Ocean Champions 2.0 project that we did in Lagos and Ondo State. She has been recognized for her work by the European Commission, the Government of Ireland, the US State Department, and others. She has spoken at events on 4 continents and is a passionate advocate for youth-led sustainable development. So can we all appreciate Courtney with beautiful emojis, clapping emojis, those of us that are joining live on Zoom. And for those on YouTube as well, you can drop in clapping emojis. Welcome, Courtney.
Thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate the introduction, but I hope you all appreciate how it's kind of like to hear someone talk about you. So just to say, I'm here not on my high horse. I am here because I fell off the horse many, many times. And what I'm going to share to you today about marketing and impact marketing, I did not learn through all these, fancy things. I learned the hard way because I made a big mess. And so I want to make sure that I can help you not to make the mess. So why am I here today talking about marketing? And this is kind of personal to me because I have a situation where there were two organizations. One organization had the most beautiful social media you've ever seen in your whole life. Like they looked like they were going to give the UN a run for their money. And then there was, but actually what they were doing on the ground was very little. And then there was an organization that is to this day one of the most incredible organizations I've ever come across. They were like meeting their goals, changing lives. They didn't have time for social media and marketing because they were literally saving people's lives. And both organizations applied for funding, and the organization that was well branded and marketed got the funding over the organization that was doing objectively better work. And that was the moment it occurred to me just how important it is to market impact organizations, because you can be doing the most incredible work out there, but if you don't market it properly, unfortunately, this situation will happen where, someone who spends 97% of their time making beautiful marketing stuff, but not actually doing the work, is going to get funding over people who have, hands in the ground, doing the work, hitting the ground running in the communities. So that's really when I became super passionate about marketing. My background is not in marketing whatsoever. So to say now that I'm passionate about communications and marketing is quite funny. But as mentioned, I worked in different roles to do with communications at global change makers, within the United Nations system, within my own two organizations. And so all of these tips and tricks, as I mentioned, are things that I've learned the hard way. So how I'm going to approach this session, they're kind of a few starting points. So the first is, I know that you are all volunteers with this organization, but I'm going to share information that will not only support you in this role, but can support you in future roles, can be support you if you decide to start your own impact organization one day. So it's kind of going to be very broad. Marketing information is the first thing. The second thing is I'm going to assume that whether it's within this organization or other organizations, that you've done the work to understand what the mission is, what your goals are, kind of what you're trying to achieve. So it'll kind of take off from that point, assuming that you've done that work. And then lastly, in terms of the format, I'm just going to kind of throw a lot of information at you, and I'm going to ask that you hold your questions until the end, because perhaps I'll answer your question or something along those lines. So what do I mean by marketing? It's essentially just how you promote the work that you're doing, how you reach your target audiences, how marketing can help you reach your goals. And impactful marketing is all about reaching the right people at the right time with the right message. So who are the right people? What is the right time? What is the right message? Hopefully, these questions will be answered for you today. Now, promotion can include all sorts of things like having conversations with people, attending conferences, pitching your organization at events, sending cold emails, all of these kinds of things. But it can also include this kind of umbrella term marketing. And I became an expert in doing high quality marketing with zero money, because as we know, working in the impact sector, there's never enough funds. And what funds there are, we want to go to the work that really matters, the people that we are serving. We're not the United Nations. We don't have a budget of $3 million and a team of 180 people. So what I'm going to share with you today is how to make the most of the time and the resources that you spend on high quality communication, so that you can make the bulk of the time and energy and resources you spend on the work and the mission and the people that we're serving, because that is why we're here. So step one, the first thing you should be thinking about is why. Why do you need to market your organization? Do you need funding? Do you need to show proof of the work that you're doing? Do you need volunteers? Do you need sponsors? Do you need partners? Do you want to raise awareness? Do you need people to sign a petition? Do you want people to show up at a rally? Do you want people to show up at a cleanup? Why are you marketing your organization? And a trick, if you're kind of getting stuck on this, is to put your organization's goals on one side, and then on the other side to kind of see how your different marketing goals can reach those specific goals. So for example, if you want to have 200 volunteers for the organization by the end of the year, that can then, one of your marketing goals can be able to get 200 people to sign up to volunteer for the organization, for example. And so understanding why can really help you make the most of the time that you spend on communication. And I also want to just make a note on the why here. I think it's so tempting, specifically in the social media landscape, to just post, the algorithm and this and that and the next thing. And so we just need to keep constant. But I want to discourage you from posting for posting's sake, creating content just because you feel the pressure to create content. Because what this does is, if you just post to keep frequency, for example, if someone is scrolling on their feed, now we're talking about social media here, there's lots of different ways that you can market. But, if someone's just scrolling and they just see kind of a random post that doesn't really mean anything, It's not really asking for anything. It's just kind of there, takes up space, takes up attention. They're going to start learning that they can just scroll past your content. And we don't want that. So don't ever post because you feel pressure to post. Every single marketing or communications you do should have a clear purpose, a clear why, so that you're making the most of the attention that you have from people. And so now that we understand, why we are engaging in marketing efforts, why are we spending time on this? The second step is to understand who. Now, I've made this mistake many, many, many times because it is so tempting to say everyone. Everyone needs to know about climate change. Everyone needs to know about government corruption. Everyone needs to know about gender-based violence. Everyone needs to know about fast fashion, because we're obviously very passionate about the causes that we dedicate our time to. But what happens if you kind of target everyone is that it makes a very mixed marketing thing that takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of different messaging. And how you can be effective with limited time and limited resources is to get as clear as possible about who you are trying to reach with your communications. And a good idea about this is, who do you need to reach to help you meet those goals? So, for example, if you're working with children, there are many different people that you can work with, you can reach to reach your goals. For example, you can reach the parents, you can reach teachers, you can reach community leaders. There are many different people who you could reach that would help you reach the goals of working with children. So, for example, again, if you're doing work around, say, for example, fast fashion, you could be talking to CEOs, you could be talking to consumers, you could be talking to outlets that are selling the clothing, you could be talking to platforms that are promoting the advertising. So understanding exactly who you're targeting and who is going to be most effective will help you be most effective. And getting specific will help you understand how you can reach them. So what platforms do they use? What are they interested in? What language do they use? For example, how you talk to a CEO is going to be extremely different to how you talk to a high school student. That's what I mean by what language do they use. Saying to a CEO, donate to climate change because it's lit, bro. Sorry, I'm a millennial. Excuse the millennial slang, but that's not going to really be effective with CEO, for example. It's probably not going to be effective with a high schooler either, given the generational divide between Gen Z and millennials. But understanding who you are targeting can then understand how to target the language. And so if you're kind of getting stuck on this, you can make a target persona. What is a target persona? It's like you can kind of imagine your ideal person that you're trying to reach. And then this can help you answer questions about them. So like I mentioned earlier, who are they? What spaces do they visit? Are they in shopping malls? Are they on campuses? Are they in office buildings? What platforms do they use? Are they in WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups? Are they, seeing posters at a bus stop? Are they listening to community radio? So if we give an example, say for example, we're doing this fast fashion workshop that we want to put together, and you can say, okay, our primary target audience is participants and our secondary target audience is sponsors. So you can kind of dream up your target audience. You can say, okay, our ideal primary target audience is Dina. She's between 18 and 22 years old. She's a fashion student at this university. She uses TikTok and Instagram, but not Facebook, not Twitter, excuse me, X. She goes to classes regularly. She takes the bus to campus. And then, you can kind of start imagining who that is and how you can reach her. And then for our secondary target audience, we can say, okay, our ideal sponsor is Mohammed. He is between 45 and 55 years old. He's a business owner. His business cares about the environment and community development. They have a local office. They have a website that has contact details on it. And they have a stack of newspapers in the office. So maybe you can assume that they read the newspaper, kind of getting clear on who your persona is. Because that leads into our next step. Once you know why and who, then you can get into the how. And I briefly touched on this, understanding where your people are getting information with, what media they're engaging with, can then help you understand how best to communicate to them and how to market them. So for example, if you are working with a rural community, say in Cameroon, for example, and you want to target grandmothers, using TikTok is not going to be effective, but maybe using community radio, maybe going to meetings with the elders. These different ideas can give you an idea of what actually you need to be doing, what platforms you need to be on. Because again, I think it's so tempting, especially as young people in this game to feel this pressure to have an Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, YouTube, like we get so tempted to have all these platforms, but not realizing that big organizations that have all these platforms, say for example, One Young World, etc., they have a person that they hire to manage every single platform. It takes a lot of time and a lot of energy to do each platform well. But understanding what you want to do and who you want to target can then give you an idea of, okay, do we actually need to have a Twitter? Do we actually need to have a Patreon? Do we actually need to have a newsletter? Do we actually need to have a website, etc., etc.? For example, on the idea of a website, there's this pressure to feel like, okay, everyone needs a website. But if the target audience that you're trying to reach, for example, is again, a community that doesn't have access to the internet or data is like extremely expensive, like in my country, South Africa, maybe a website is not the most effective thing to have. Maybe a WhatsApp group or, something that's less data intensive. If I could give you kind of a tip, and I know the organization that you're volunteering for has beautiful media landscape. But if you are working for another organization or establishing your own organization, having an Instagram is a really nice platform to have because it's very visual and it can serve as that proof of concept. So through photos, you can prove to donors or to sponsors, okay, we do what we say we're going to do because here's the proof in the form of an image, for example. And that's also a much easier thing to have than a website if you're starting your own project. But I don't know, if any of you are starting or thinking of starting, or if in the future you'd like to start. So that's just kind of a little bit of a tip there. All right, so now we have the who, the how, and the why. We kind of go on to what. So what goes into marketing and communications? And here I'd like to talk a little bit about the brand. And so, like I mentioned at the start, the brand is the perception that you create of an organization. And I hate it so much, but organizations that are well branded and present themselves as professional and high quality will give a sense of peace and confidence to a donor who might not be on the ground with you, or a volunteer who sees your organization, or a company that wants to partner with you. So having a high quality brand can really help you achieve your goals. And it's very easy to do so with very little money. So what a brand is more than a logo. A brand is everything people think about your organization. It's the visual identity. So yes, it's the logo, the colors, the fonts. It's the identity that you create through the mission, the work, the things that you do. It's how your organization represents itself. It's how your volunteers represent itself. It's how you talk about the organization. And how to create a high quality brand is through consistency. Consistency, consistency, consistency. So for example, if you have a brand identity, so you've got your logo, you've got your colors, you've got your fonts, making sure that everyone on the team, or any new volunteers that come into the team, or anyone who is assigned with the role of managing any marketing or communications that go out, so whether that be creating posters, WhatsApp messages, newsletters, updating a blog, posting on social media, they need to use the exact brand colors, the brand identity, the logo, and the fonts, because all of this kind of creates that consistency around the brand. So when someone sees something, they immediately know that's this organization. And of course, there's very recognizable brands in the world that you can see the font of Coca-Cola and the color, and you immediately know it's Coca-Cola without the wording being Coca-Cola, because they have that consistency, and you'll never see them deviating from the font, the colors, and the visual identity and the logo. So that's a thing on kind of the visual identity. And again, there are tips that can help you with this. So for example, Canva. In Canva, you can have, if you've got the premium version, which pro tip, all NGOs that are registered get free Canva Premium, then you can create a brand guide within Canva so that any volunteer on any team can go in and have the exact colors, the exact font, and access to all the logos. So you don't have to consistently share that. Another tip is creating a brand guide. And now your organization might already have one, but it's kind of like a PDF that you can send to anyone who's new, share through any training, and just say, hey, if you're going to create any visual materials for the organization, you need to use this logo, these colors, these fonts, just to create that consistency. All right, so that is on the visual branding. And now we're kind of going to get onto the messaging. and the wording and how you talk about the organization can feed into this big concept of the brand. So all of these things, every time you speak about the organization, you present the organization, you represent the organization, you show up in public, they're all kind of little pieces of information that goes into this big kind of imaginary concept of a brand in people's minds. And so to develop a strong brand, you need to have the same message, the same design, the same tone of voice when you're speaking, the same feeling in each interaction that you have with your target audience. So if we're looking at a wild example, if your social media says you work to develop the skills of women in Ghana, but your email says you work to uplift communities through skill building workshops, and then your website says you host workshops for stay-at-home moms, and say, for example, your poster says that you sell products made by local women, all of these descriptions could describe the work that you're doing, and they all could be true, but it doesn't give a clear picture of what your organization does, how it does it, or why. So making sure that you have very consistent wording and messaging across any communication. So if you have a team member who's responsible for WhatsApp and a team member responsible for email and a team member responsible for the blog, making sure that they have the same wording to describe what you do. So making sure that they have the actual mission statement of the organization. Any new volunteers, you can talk to them about the kind of language. You can put it on the brand guide or something like that, just to make sure that there's clear, consistent messaging so that people know what do you do, how do you do it, who do you do it for. And then if you have kind of that clear picture of your target audience, this can also help you understand it, because how you talk to a grandmother is going to be very different to how you talk to a school teacher. How you talk to a volunteer is going to be very different to how you talk to a sponsor. For example, a volunteer doesn't need to know that sponsors get tax deductions, or a sponsor doesn't need to know what time and place they need to show, like, volunteers need to show up before a workshop, etc., etc. So making sure that you understand your target audience and that you're communicating to that target audience on the right platform is really important, so that you don't take away attention or time or space. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but my attention span since specifically TikTok and Reels became a thing has become like this big. So I don't have attention to read long, lengthy posts that have information that's not relevant to me. So making sure that you focus on what is most important only for that target audience. So if you are having a newsletter that's specifically designed, or for example, let me use a different example. If you have a Facebook group that's for the parents of the participants that you have, making sure that the communications in there are only for the parents. Or if you have a WhatsApp group for volunteers, making sure the communications in there are only for volunteers, etc., 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 just to make sure that speak to the people that you're trying to talk to your target audience, and use language that matters to them. I've had people speak to me before about kind of what kind of words they can use and things like that, and how you want to present yourselves. There's some examples of language where you can say, I don't know if you've heard the expression eat the rich, this kind of anti-capitalist slogan, eat the rich. And it's such a phrase that will speak to a very specific target audience. And so getting that specific, okay, who are we actually talking to here? Who is our target audience? Who is our persona? What are they interested in? Can allow you to get that specific and granular, because the phrase eat the rich is really going to make a lot of people extremely mad, and it could make you a lot of enemies, but that's going to help you reach a very specific target audience. And so understanding the language you're using. For example, if you have a project that's promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, the phrase diversity, equity, and inclusion is going to turn a lot of people off because they don't understand what it means. But if you want to reach professionals in the space, they will understand that language. They will understand, jargon that might be related to the science of, say, climate change, for example. Or if your target audience is medical professionals, there are terms that you could speak to them that I wouldn't understand because I'm not a medical professional, but I am not the target audience a medical professional is. So thinking about, that language. And again, it's super tempting to say, okay, we want this to reach as wide an audience as possible. We want to reach as many target audiences as possible. And of course, you can tailor your language that way, but just kind of giving a little bit of thought to that. And an interesting tool that you can use for this, as we all do nowadays, is ChatGPT or Gemini or any of the platforms. You could say, okay, this is what I want to say. And this is, can you simplify this for me? And can you put it in this tone? So you can decide, okay, we want the organization to be happy. We want it to be bold. We want it to feel like there's energy, there's movement. You know, what tone do you want the organization to have? You can say the exact same thing in two very different tones. For example, if you're raising money for humanitarian aid, you can focus on the absolute horrors that people are experiencing, or you can focus on the incredible joys that the humanitarian aid that you have is making for that community. You know, so they're saying the same thing, but you're using two very different tones. And another thing with clear communication is being very specific about who, what, where, how, and why. You know, don't make people have to do a lot of hard work to understand what you're trying to say. Tell them what you're trying to say. I am 100% sure that all of you have seen something where you're like, what are they actually trying to say here? Like, don't make people do mental cartwheels to understand what you're trying to say. Speak clearly, speak concisely, and don't do the work for them. Don't make people have to work to try and understand what you're trying to say. So if it's in an email, you know, have someone proofread it. If it's in a poster, make sure someone reads it and makes logical sense. If you're going to run an ad on community radio, like repeat it to a few people. Make sure you're answering the key questions: who, how, what, where, and why. Make sure you're making the most of people's attention. Make sure it's extremely clear. And another big thing about the messaging is answering the question, so what? You know, often I see impact communications where you'll say, um, okay, this issue is so terrible and it's a catastrophic and it's awful and it's awful. So what? You know, you need to make it very specific to your target audience. So you could say, okay, erosion is bad. So what? Yeah, you know, so what I mean by contextualizing it to your target audience, erosion means something very different to a farmer than it does, for example, to a school child who has to walk to work along a road that's eroded, than it does, you know, to a wildlife conservationist. Making sure that you contextualize the so what to your target audience is really important. And so answering that question for them, so what? Making sure it's very clear, because if you're saying, you know, climate change, you're talking about climate change. The so what for a farmer in sub-Saharan Africa is very different to the so what of an Eskimo in the North Pole, because you need to contextualize climate change for both of them. The climate change will have very different impacts on both groups. So I hope I'm making sense there. Another tip that I use in every single communication, from essays to emails to you name it, is keep it simple, stupid. KISS. You say something as simply as possible, and obviously some things are very complicated, so you can't say it, you know, you can't make them more simple than they are. But keep it simple, stupid. Say it as simply as you possibly can. You know, asking if you have a 10-year-old cousin or a 5 year, you know, 10, 15-year-old cousin, and say, does this make sense to you? And if they say no, then you need to reword how you've worded something. You know, people, especially if you're going to be using platforms like social media, attention is limited. The time that people go on social media, it's after work, they've had a long day. You know, make it as simple as possible for them. Do the work for them. And then thinking a little bit more about, as I mentioned earlier, what is most important for people to know. And if you start anything, if you have to write a social media post, an email, a poster, an advert, a speech, what do I want these people to remember after they engage with this is really important. So understanding that, and then as I mentioned earlier, you know, using language that's really appropriate, and then just being consistent. So, you know, describing what you do in the same way, making sure everyone within the team who has access to the channels does it in a very consistent way, that you're all saying the same thing, that you're not kind of each putting your own individual spin on how you describe the organization publicly. I mean, obviously, if you're doing it to your friends and family, that's fine. But if you are representing the organization in an official capacity, you need to be talking about it with approved language. So, lastly, just a few tips in terms of how to build this kind of high quality looking brand. And I just want to reiterate, I so hate that this is a thing, because the work should speak for itself. If you're doing good work, that should be enough. And it's like one of the reasons why I help organizations with their marketing, is because I want the work to be able to shine through. So, you know, doing that. But another one is high quality imagery. And so, like most of you, a lot of the work that you'd be taking of projects will be on a cell phone. That's absolutely fine. But a way that you can make cell phone images seem a lot more high quality is just on your phone, in your phone's editor, you can increase the contrast and increase the saturation. So if you go into the photo editor on your phone, increasing contrast and increasing saturation can make an image appear more high quality, which is often a very good tip. If you are making video content, say for Reels or TikTok or YouTube, there are apps that will create captions. And captions are a great way for people to engage with the content more because perhaps like most of you, if I'm looking at Reels or TikToks or YouTubes, and I'm not supposed to be, I read the captions. And so that can be another way to increase engagement with your project, with your work that you're putting out there. A big tip is in every marketing communication that goes out there, you have your so what followed by your what now. So, whether you want people to sign a petition or volunteer or sign up to your newsletter or go to your website or call their local representative or speak to their elderlies, the elderly people in their life about a certain topic, or make sure that their younger sibling understands the dangers of predators online. Whatever it is, you need to have a what now. What action do you want them to take after they've engaged with this content? And in terms of this, like thinking about if it's something like you want them to sign a petition or donate or leave their information on a Google form, think about the pathway that they have to take that action and make it as easy as possible by removing as many barriers as you can. So let's use the example. You want people to sign up to, say, a Google form. If you on Instagram say, okay, if you're interested in this now, sign up to the next event, and then you post a link there, and the link goes to the homepage of your website, and then there's nothing about the form there, so they have to like click on the menu and scroll, and then click on the menu and scroll, and click, and okay, and there's the form, and they go, and then the form is there, and then they've got to click on the thing, and it takes them to the Google thing, and then it goes there, and that no one is going to take that many steps. So making it as easy as possible for people to do the thing that you're asking them to do. Whether you want them to write their local representatives about a specific issue, draft what they need to say for them that they can use as a template. Take the work away from them. If you want them to make a donation, make sure that the link that you provide goes directly to the donations page and not to, for example, the home page. And then you've got to click donate, and then you go onto the donate page, and then you've got to read something, and you've got to click something. And then, just talking about it, it sounds a lot, right? And again, feel free as another tip to use AI to make your life easier. So you can tell ChatGPT, these are my goals. This is my target audience. This is what I want to achieve. These are the platforms I'm using. Give me a posting schedule. Give me ideas for posts. We don't, we're trying to save time on the marketing so that we can spend time on the work, on the impact, on the people that we are serving, right? Again, another tip is every single platform that you use has best practices, and people have spent a lot of time and energy understanding what these best practices are. So you can say best practices for a radio ad, best practices for a speech at a government building, best practices for a LinkedIn post, best practices for a cold email. And like was the wildest thing to me. If you are sending a cold email to someone, and it is more than one, that it is so long that you have to scroll twice on a phone, you're not going to get what you want from it. So there are very specific best practices that you can find just by Googling them that can make your life so much easier in terms of how long you want a post to be, how short you want a post to be, how, what to say in a newsletter, how to say something. Feel free to Google that because a lot of people have put a lot of time and effort into those things. And then, at the end of it all, you need to see if what you're doing is actually working. So if you have, okay, we want to reach women in their 50s in a specific community about this issue. And then you use, say, for example, Instagram or LinkedIn analytics, and you see, oh, wait, we're only reaching like 13-year-old boys in a completely different community. Then your strategy is not working, right? And so really understanding, what am I doing? Is it reaching the target audience? Is it reaching the goals? Okay, so for example, I want to reach volunteers, but no one's signing up. Why are volunteers not signing up? Okay, I want to get donations. Why? But no donations have come in. And don't be afraid to speak to your target audience and ask them, why didn't you engage with this? Why did you engage with this? What would be something you would want to see from us? What would be, these kinds of, don't be afraid to engage with your target audience, to ask for feedback on your marketing strategy. Again, so that you can make sure that the time that you're spending is effective and is helping you reach them goals. And just adapt your strategy. If the branding or the messaging, adapt your strategy, but also just never adapt the branding or the messaging, unless the feedback is that the messaging is not resonating, but the branding must always be consistent across the organization. And now that I've thrown all of this at you, kind of just to conclude in saying there are many, many, many different ways to market your organization and to reach your target audience. And just making sure that you spend time thinking about it and planning it can make sure that the time that you put in is not wasted, that you're not doing unnecessary tasks on platforms that are not giving you results. Again, to the measurement and the analytics, if, for example, you're posting on Twitter consistently, but you get 1 or 2 likes, really question, is it actually worth having a Twitter account and spending the time it takes to create and maintain that platform if it's reaching 2 people, where, for example, on LinkedIn, maybe you're reaching 1,000 people every post. So there are many different ways to do this. There are many different ways to reach your audience. Don't get stuck on there, we have to have every single platform. Don't get stuck in there, we have to post because we need to be consistent necessarily. And just making sure again and again that your marketing aligns with the mission and doesn't take away from the mission. It must serve a clear purpose, it must be consistent, and it must all just be a means to the end, which is the impact that you want to achieve. So with that is everything I have to throw at you. I hope I spoke well, and I'm happy to take questions from anyone at this point.
Wow, thank you so much, Courtney. For those who are joining us live on Zoom, please kindly appreciate Courtney in the chat box. I want to see appreciations in the chat box. Thank you so much, Courtney. And I love this phase of not necessarily presenting. I know sometimes we present, sometimes we don't, but I kind of have everyone's attention on the spot. All right, and I was able to take down some notes, some highlights from the session. Please, if you have questions, please drop them off. And for those who will be getting the data subscription, please wait to the end of the call so we could announce those who are eligible for data reimbursement. And so one of the highlights I got while you were speaking is when it comes to impact marketing, you have to answer the question on why, the question on who, how, and what, right? And also understanding your target audience, you have to design a target persona, right? And one thing I understand from what you're trying to say is you should not use the same approach for different stakeholders who you want to engage, right? However, I have a question concerning sharing your brand guidelines with potential speakers. Oh, we want to have this session, kindly look through these. How do you communicate that in the most polite way, right? How do you make sure that you're like trying to communicate? You're not like telling them, hey, you have to follow this, you have to do this, right? So how do we communicate that in the most polite manner? Let's start with that.
So for example, if you're having an event where you have external speakers come in, make it as easy as possible for them to use your branding. So create a template PowerPoint for them with different slide options that they can just go in and put their information, copy paste. You can't always control that, but make it as easy as possible for them. Remove as many barriers as you can. And then, so what I do with organizations, I just make a PowerPoint template and I send it to them. I say, please use this. When it's your own team, that's a lot easier because then you have a little bit of control. You can say, hey team, this is the standard template that we use. Here's the brand guide that we use.
Okay, all right, thank you. So for those of us who are joining us live, I would like to see if we have 1 or 2 questions before we let Courtney go. And that was so right on time from Courtney. She delivered precisely during 40 minutes duration. She did not exceed her time. Thank you so much for sticking with the time, Courtney. So if there are any questions we'd like, I think this is the perfect time for you to unmute if you would like to ask straight away, or chat box. Anyone, any question from anybody? Okay, no question. All right, so there's a special announcement, everyone. Um, the Global Change Makers is currently being nominated for um, an award, and they require voting from the general public. So I'm going to be sharing the link right now in the chat box. Please, would like every one of us to click on the link and vote Global Change Makers. It's going to take 30 seconds, like I
Maybe
promise you.
even less. Literally, just open the link, you scroll, you click vote. Please do it.
So you're not looking for any option. The only option there is Global Change Makers. All right. So I'm going to drop that now in the chat box. Please, everyone, this is a time you can use different browsers to vote. It's open, like I said, to general public. So please, I'm going to drop this now. Remember that Courtney is a consultant with the Global Changemaker Society. And this is one of our big ways of saying thank you to Courtney. Like I said, I would always say this, if you want to have a consultation with an expert, you know how much it will cost you to have a 30-minute call with them, right? And you have just received um, almost the best information that you can from every expert. All right, so I'll be dropping that now. Please hold
Thank you,
on.
guys. And just to kind of reiterate, Global Changemakers supports young people to do impactful work. They provide grant funding, they provide skills development. The lecture that I just gave to you is available as an online course with Global Changemakers. So the votes really mean something. The impact actually goes to the people that they're trying to serve. I can really vouch for them. And then just to close, I just want to say, if you do have any questions, don't be afraid of Google. That is how I learned pretty much all of this stuff. Once I made the mistake, I was like, okay, I need to actually figure this out. You know, you guys are more powerful than you think. And so, you know, you got this. You got this.
All right, so I just dropped the chat now.